Mura Griffith, you've come out from the northwest of England all the way to Strasbourg. First of all, why did you make the journey out here to the European Parliament?
So I've come here to the European Parliament really to represent the UK, but also Europe, really, in terms of disabled people accessing those who have powerful positions and trying to influence some change, really, because, you know, as a lot of people will know, disabled people are overrepresented in poverty. They're being marginalised, exploited, isolated within society, and some of this is due to the austerity measures, but also due to negative attitudes and policies and services not reflecting our potential, really. And that's why it's important that we need to really try and push the governments and member states to actually create some positive change.
And how important do you think it was to come out in person to the European Parliament, not just lobby your MEPs from back in the northwest, but actually come out here and a huge group to come out here? I mean, it's unmissable the size of the group walking and moving through the European Parliament.
Well, we brought ENOL Freedom Drive has brought for this year has brought 230 people. A majority of them are disabled people. I think, although we will know that in Europe there are around 20 million disabled people, we make up around 15% of the European community. And yet there's only 260 people here, so I'm not entirely happy with that number. But I think that we need to be honest and say that actually the reason why there's not more of us is because disabled people are facing daily battles and daily barriers created not by their health impairment or their health condition, but by society, by societal barriers that have been put in place. And really that's why we need to show government, show those in powerful positions that we are here, we've come here, we've used our own money, we've used our own time, we've used our own assistance to reflect our journey. And it's now a case of we really need to sit down and work in partnership with government, with member states, to actually create some change, because whether you're a disabled person in the mainland of Europe or whether you're a disabled person in my home country of the UK, we're facing barriers that are pretty much the same. So we know that actually these are barriers brought on by governments and by heads of delivery of services, and that's why we really need some changes.
And not least, I suppose, those barriers come in transport. So the journey here alone, how was that for you and for other people that have come here to Strasbourg?
Well, I think as a disabled person, one of the key characteristics of being disabled is that you have to micromanage every aspect of your life with built-in contingencies for when things go wrong, which they often do, because we live in a society created by non-disabled people for a non-disabled society. So we do face barriers. There's no, of course, the level of spontaneity doesn't exist when you're disabled. You have to plan everything in advance. So I had to book all my travel in advance because I don't have the right of turning up unannounced and saying I want to travel, because as a disabled person I'm expected to plan in advance, which I think is completely wrong. And also a lot of disabled people will be able to empathise that if you have a high level of support needs, it usually means you have to pay more money to get those support needs met. And that's why, as you'll see, that a lot of disabled people can't make it to these events or these drives because they don't have the money to actually meet their needs, because government is not funding their support.
And you mentioned that you wanted to lobby MEPs on a whole variety of issues. You just mentioned transport, but what about, for example, on austerity measures? What kind of impact is that having and have had on disabled people like yourself in the UK, in the northwest of England, and what message on that did you want to bring to Europe?
We know that when you have austerity measures, it usually hits the hardest minority groups, and disabled people make up the largest minority group. So naturally, with the austerity measures, it has meant that our services are being cut. We've strived hard over the years, the disability community, to have person-centred planning, to have support that is self-directed, so that we are in control of our own budgets and to meet our needs, because we are experts by experience. And unfortunately, when you have governments that are cutting the budgets, it means that we don't have our needs met. It means that we become more isolated. We rely so heavily on disabled people's organisations, and when I say disabled people's organisations, I mean organisations that are run by disabled people, not for disabled people. So with all that in mind, with disabled people's organisations closing as a matter of a lack of funding, it means that we're becoming heavily isolated. And actually, in a time of austerity when we need to rely on the skills and potential of all our people who are in our communities, we're marginalising and side pushing disabled people, when actually if we just invest a little bit of time and consideration and actually give them the level of support that they need, in return they will become natural contributors to society, and they will be valued by society, and they will have roles and responsibilities to help with the functioning of our communities.
And just finally, your take on the reaction you've had from MEPs here in Europe, of those that you've seen so far whilst you've been in the European Parliament. What have you made of what they've had to say, and did you feel that it was more than just talking the talk, really?
I mean, I'm always conscious when meeting people in powerful positions, whether it's very tokenistic. And we don't want to lie. We came to this meeting, we planned it in advance, and yet we did have a small representation of MEPs. Thanks you to those who did turn out to see us. It shows, but the key issue of not many turning up when we contacted all MEPs to attend is quite symbolic, really, of their reflection on towards disabled people's issues. I think what we need now is to actually create some partnership. There has been talk of partnerships by member states to actually include disabled people, empowered disabled people within decision-making processes. And the idea that came out of from Adolf, who's one of the pioneers of independent living in Europe, a disabled person, he's requested the call for a disability commissioner. So we have a standard person who will just single-handedly look at disability within all aspects of society, because disability shouldn't be bolted on to any aspects of society or community life. It should be embedded within all processes, because disability is a natural part of the community, it's a natural part of culture, and we really need to think of it as a priority in all aspects of life.